Morning. Happy Sabbath. Today we'll be reading from Romans 12, verse 16. Like my pal Tony, I'm going to give you time to look it up. Everybody there? Good. It says, "Be of the same mind toward one another. Do not set your mind on high things, but associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own opinion." May the Lord bless these words.
All right, good morning, everyone. Ooh, we don't want feedback. That's not good. So today I'm going to be talking about paradoxes. So one of the things that I have learned, it's when you get in your 20s. I don't know if any of you had this experience where you get to your 20s and then you look back at your teen years and you go, I'm not a dumb teenager anymore. Boy, I thought I knew everything. Now I'm 20. Now I know something about the world. And then when you turn 30, you have that experience again. And you look back at your 20s and you go, oh my gosh, there are so many things that I really believed that were this way, and it turned out I was completely wrong about them. So one of the things that I was wrong about was that things are simple. I remember, when you're young, you think everything is black and white. It's very simple, but it turns out, things are way more complicated. And there's a lot of these kind of paradoxes in the Bible. Like for the Trinity, for example. How is Jesus fully God and fully man? These are like contradictory. It's like it's very complicated to explain. The funny thing is when people tell you, oh, it's simple. The Trinity is simple. It's like, okay, sure, but somehow both of those ideas have to be true. If Jesus isn't fully man, he can't really relate to us. And if he's not fully God, then how does he have power over the devil and over sin? So it's like both of those somehow have to be true. And the same thing with God's foreknowledge. God knows everything that we're going to do, and yet we still have a choice to make. And so I don't know how both of those are true, but we have to kind of accept them as truth. So I'll be talking about kind of the paradox of meekness and power for men, especially. But I know that I'm going to be talking a lot about men, but I think women have a role to play in how men are raised as well. So if you be patient with me. I wanted to, talk about there's a lot of confusing messages that we get about what it means to be a man today. And it's something that Jesus says in Matthew 11:29, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you shall find rest unto your souls." So Jesus was God, and he said during his arrest in Matthew 26:53 that he's capable of calling down a legion of angels to command and to rescue him. But somehow he's also a man, and he describes himself as meek and lowly. So that's very like opposite ideas, that you're like powerful enough to call down legions of angels, but then you're also meek and lowly. Like you wouldn't think about somebody who has the power to command angels as like meek and lowly. So I wanted to say that there's a Christian woman from Australia. She has a blog. Her name is Margaret Moscow, and she did a bunch of research on the word meek, and I read a lot about it. She quoted this guy named Xenophon from ancient Greece, and this because the thing is, like we have this we have the text of the Bible, and we have these words that are used in the Bible, and how are those words used elsewhere at the same time? So there's this guy that's writing all this stuff about horses, which is kind of funny. It's like a guidebook. You don't think about people in ancient Greece like writing a guidebook of like step 1 for training a horse, and this is what you could do to train a horse. And so they use that word, that a word that's related to that word meekness. So this is the guy. His name is Xenophon. On horsemanship. Accordingly, at the moment of mounting, the rider should take care to worry the horse as little as possible. And when he is mounted, he should let him stand still longer than is otherwise usual, and then direct him to go by the most gentle aids. And that word most gentle is that word meek, or it's related to that word meek. Then let him begin at a very slow pace and increase the speed with the same gentle help, so that the horse will not be aware of the transition to a quicker motion. Another thing he said is, if you want to correct a spirited horse when he's going too fast, do not pull him suddenly, but quietly check him with a bit, soothing him. And that word soothing is a word about being meek and being gentle. It should also be known that, this is another thing he said about horses, it should also be known that a horse can be taught to be calm by a chirp with the lips, and to be roused by a cluck with the tongue. And if from the first you use with the cluck aids him to be calm, and that word calm is, again, that word for meek, and with the chirp aids to rouse him, the horse will learn to rouse himself at the chirp and to calm down. So this word was used to signify the taming of animals. And if an animal was obedient and followed and was responsive to the rider, they called it meek. And then there was also this word used about soldiers. Cyrus took good. So this is him speaking about a commander. Cyrus also took care that soldiers should never come to luncheon or dinner unless they had a sweat. For he would get them into a sweat by taking them out hunting, or he would contrive such sports as would make them sweat. Or again, if he happened to have some business or otherwise to attend to, he so conducted it so that they should not come back without having had a sweat. This is good advice for parenting too. You got to wear them out. You got to wear your kids out. For this to be considered conducive to their enjoying their meals, to their health, and to their being able to endure hardships, he thought that hardships conducted to their being more reasonable toward one another. And that word more reasonable is related to that word meek. More reasonable, more calm. You've had a sweat. You're calm when you've had a sweat towards one another. At any rate, those who are conscious that they have been well drilled are certainly more courageous in the face of the enemy. And so they will, even horses that work together stand more quietly together. So, and that word more quietly is that word related to meek. So it's used a lot in the Bible. So, but that idea that it's being tamed. So it's again kind of a paradox that you're tamed but you're powerful. It's a weird mix. So going back to what does it mean to be a man? I think this is a confusing time to be a man, and there's a lot of things about traditional masculinity that is regarded in our pop culture as being toxic. If men are assertive or aggressive, it's kind of a thin line between assertive and aggressive. But or they say that men don't cry. Men must restrain and control their emotions. And today, a lot of people think, well, that sounds kind of antiquated. That why can't men just show their emotions? I hear a lot of people ask that. And yet this is another paradox because, yeah, men should be able to express their emotions, but a man who can't control his emotions is a dangerous man. And anybody that's had to wrangle a kid who's flying off the handle, or especially, that was another book I read that said, the future is now. It's about parenting. The future is now. Whatever your kid is doing, add 10 years or 20 years to that. That's what they're going to be doing as an adult. So if you've got a kid that can't control their emotions and is throwing a fit, add 20 years to that, and they're going to be doing that with a police officer someday. So if you don't believe me, you can talk to a friend, somebody in law enforcement. They've had to handle plenty of adult temper tantrums. So men are told to be vulnerable. They should share their feelings, but then when a man complains about the wrong things, such as women rejecting him, he's often laughed at, and it's seen as not a very serious concern. But this can get ugly quick. I read an article about a man that he was a shooter, and he killed 6 people for revenge because women were rejecting him. And he was also taking out revenge against the men who got accepted. It's kind of a Cain and Abel story. Almost every one of these shooters is a story of Cain and Abel. It's like one person's getting accepted and the other person's resentful about that, and their response is to kill that person. So the saddest part is that he posted videos of himself plotting the shooting on YouTube, and it even caused his parents to call the police. But the police didn't take the video seriously, and it looks from all accounts that they didn't even watch them. And as I was reading the article, and I was like, I couldn't help but watch his videos. I was like, what would he have said, and why didn't the police listen? If the mom and dad saw this and got worried, it was really disturbing. Like it still sticks in my head, some of the stuff that I saw there. He told a lot of stories about obnoxious men, and he saw that women would respond favorably to these obnoxious men, and then he was angry that women rejected him, and he called himself the supreme gentleman. That was the weirdest part of it. Is he made so many references to that. Well, I'm the nicest person. I'm so nice. I never make people uncomfortable. I'm not like these obnoxious people. And so apparently, like, he stewed over this for years, and he made a secret deal with the women of the world. It's nuts when you look into it, that he was going to go out to a party, and he was going to give women one last chance to recognize how much of a supreme gentleman he was. And while he was there, he drank a lot, and then he just sat by the side and waited for people to come to him, and no one came to him. And so then he went up on the balcony, and there were some again more of these obnoxious men, and the ladies seemed to be having a good time talking to him. And so he tried to shove one of the women off the balcony, and a bunch of the men got together and said no, and then beat him up, and he had to limp home. And he realized when he got home that he had a pair of sunglasses, and it was a pair of sunglasses that his mom bought him, and he had a lot of really wonderful things to say about his mom. He loved his mom, but it's so weird that he was so anti-women at the same time. So then he goes back to the party to get his sunglasses, and not only doesn't find them, but the same guys beat him up again and mock him and send him home, and that's when he begins plotting his revenge. And so as I was listening to this guy's story, and I'm listening to it really is the Cain and Abel story again. This idea about resentment, being resentful, and being bitter about your life and the way that it turns out. And I was reading people criticizing him, and they were. It's striking. There were two things that struck me. One was just how much of a horrible plan it was to stand at the side and just expect women to magically see you, and two, how many times he referred to himself as a gentleman and how nice he was. So it's crazy how a person that can pride themselves on being so nice can end up being a killer. We are the easiest person to deceive. The easiest person to deceive is ourselves. So a lot of people, they criticized his attitude. They said, "Oh, he's entitled. He thinks, the people that women must respond to him, and women must like him." And when I was listening to it, I couldn't help but wonder, where did he get such an idea that being harmless and being off to the side and never risking anything would make people drawn to him? It's such a strange idea that you could do that. And I remember people describing what he was doing as like toxic masculinity. And I remember thinking, there's nothing masculine about what he's doing. There's like the traditional masculine idea, the process whereby a man finds a wife, is first he has to make himself into something. He has to work on apprenticing into some kind of trade. He has to become something. And then he has to court a woman and propose marriage and put himself out there. So he has to approach a lady and say, "Hey, I like you." That's the traditional route. Nowhere in history has it been described like the manliest thing to do is to stand off to the side and wait passively for people to come to you. Even in hyper masculine cultures like the Middle East, where there's arranged marriage, a woman can even reject a man's offer of marriage. I had a student, this is a true story, it's really fascinating. He was friends with a girl that lived next door, and they were kids, and they'd play together, they'd play soccer together, and he said he fell in love at the age of 9. And he said he loved this girl, but then when they reach puberty, they separate them. They're not allowed to be. They're not allowed to be together. And so he never saw her again. And he got a job working in a bank in a faraway city. And he heard some gossip that she had rejected 3 men's offer of marriage. So 3 families had approached her family and said, "Hey, my son would like to marry your daughter." And she said, "No thanks." And so when he heard the number 3, he got very panicked. He said, because he was telling me that, he said, "In my culture, once you've said no 3 times, now the family gets worried because they think, oh no, she's going to start a reputation that, we have a little princess, and, no man is good enough for our princess. And then we might not get any offers. Maybe she'll never get married." So as soon as he heard that, he thought, oh no, what if she's holding out for me? And he kind of believed in it. It's a beautiful story. It makes me think about the work of Jesus to woo us and stuff. So immediately he goes to his family and out of nowhere, and he tells his mom and dad, I want to get married. See if you can set something up with that family. And the mom and dad are like, what? You haven't even talked about this? This is coming out of nowhere. He's like, I need this done quickly. Hurry up and arrange for a meeting, because they're allowed to meet for like 5 minutes before they decide if they're going to get married or not. And so then he went and he actually met with her. And when they met in private, she said, "I've been waiting for you." And that she was waiting that whole time, and that she was turning down all these men. And it's such a beautiful story. And it made me think about Jesus and how Jesus, he came to earth and he opened himself up to rejection. Because, you think about that. He's got gossip that, okay, maybe she's holding out for me. He's got this idea in his head, but he doesn't know for sure. It's not like over there, you can't just talk with the opposite sex, over the phone. That would be even scandalous, doing that over the phone. So he had to go to his father and, involve his family and make an offer of marriage. And he didn't know prior to that if he was going to be rejected, and that reminds me of Jesus, that Jesus, he didn't know if he was going to get rejected. He didn't know if as a man, he didn't know that this was always going to work out. And, God took that risk with us. He took the risk with us to put himself out there. And that's actually one of the first things about becoming a man, is opening yourself up to rejection. It reminds me, there was a funny story that was told by Adam Sandler, and he was a young comedian. He said he saw a girl that he liked, and he said, "Boy, I wish I could ask her out, but I don't know what to say." And his friend's like, "Well, just ask her out. Well, the worst she can say is no." And so he went and asked her out, and she said, "Get away from me, you loser." And so then he's like, you kind of broke the rules there. But that's kind of, we're made in God's image. Jesus opened himself up to rejection. We have to open ourselves up to rejection. We have to be brave. And there's something, I don't know what is going on in our generation, that our children are not making themselves into something, and they're not hitting these milestones. It's like they don't believe in themselves, and I don't know why. Like I know, and I'm kind of glad that I don't know a lot of you, because I don't know like what you do with your kids. So this is, if you feel judged, I'm not judging you. Just don't tell me about it. But like, I know so many people, their adult children don't have driver's licenses, and you probably know people like this. Yeah, it's like, what is going on there? Why don't today's youth want to drive? It blows my mind. I still can't. I remember, when I went to a driver's test, I thought, I'm going to be able to get a car. I'm not going to have to wait for mom to pick me up from track and field practice. I'll finally be able to be independent. And there could be a lot of reasons why this, and I think it's a thing that's affecting the church. It's affecting the way we raise our children. And that in some ways, it's like we want our children to stay as children. That maybe, if they can just stay as children, then they'll always be my little baby. But the fact is that as they grow up, that baby is gone. The baby isn't there anymore. And just like just like it says in Proverbs 13:24, he that spares the rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chasteneth him betimes. So that it's a loving thing as a parent to be like, hey, make something of yourself. You can't just be a bum and not drive. Um, and there might also be, that people just don't want them to grow up. It's like what it says in Hebrews 5, verse 12, if you want to go there. For when for the time ye ought to be teachers, ye have need that one teach you again, which be the first principles of the oracles of God, and are become such as have need of milk, and not of strong meat. Verse 13, for every one that useth milk is unskillful in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe. Verse 14, but strong meat belongeth to them that are of full age, even those who by reason of use have had their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. So, there's a time for milk, and then there's a time for meat. There's a time for children to grow up, and then we have to give them the opportunity to fail. Probably the most courageous thing that a mother can do is let her child face the world to be rejected and crushed by it. And, it's like, look at the story of Mary, the mother of Jesus. I think she's a great example for all mothers that we can't protect our children forever. She let her son out into the world to be crushed by it. And we would not have heard the message if Mary had been like, oh no, Jesus, you're just go ahead, stay at home. You don't need to get a job. I'll pay all your bills, Jesus. I'll make sure that you don't have to grow up. But speaking of that, I want to tell a story. There was about like letting your children face adversity. I remember my children were all in Taekwondo, and I don't know if I've told this story here before, but I was excited because they'd gotten to the point where the belt they had, they were allowed to be in a sparring match. Okay, and they wear headgear and shin guards and all that kind of stuff. But I was excited. Oh, they're finally going to be able to fight, and I never learned to fight, so when I went to school, I just got bullied and beaten up and stuff. That's not good. It was like, oh, my kids will be able to defend themselves. But my kids were not excited about it. They were like, no, Daddy, I don't want to do that. That's going to be hard. I don't want to get kicked in the face. What if they kick me? What if they kick me? And I was like, you guys will be fine. You're wearing mouth guards, and I'm prepping the mouth guards. And if you've ever had to prep a mouth guard, you're boiling water, and you dunk it in, you get it soft, and then you bite into it. So I'm prepping that, and meanwhile the kids are like, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And they went in the other room, and their mom came in the kitchen with me, talked with me secretly, and she says, Bill, I don't know. I mean, they don't really want to do that, and I mean they're a little scared, and I don't know if they should do that, and we shouldn't make them do it. And I was like, yeah, I know, but when are they going to learn? Do we want them to learn how to fight in a safe environment, or do we want them to learn to fight when they first get bullied around and pushed around or whatever? I think it'll be good for them. They need to be pushed, and then so she's like, okay, I'll support you. But I could tell she was on the fence. She did not really want to see her babies fight. And anyway, so I'm making the mouth guard, and the troops come in again, and they go, we don't want to do this. We don't want to do this. Put that mouth guard away. We don't want to do this. It's gonna be bad. I don't want to get kicked in the head. And I'm like, hey guys, be quiet about that. And I'm putting the mouth guard in, and I accidentally hit the handle, and then a waterfall of boiling water fell onto my socked foot. I had a sock on my foot, and my foot just starts cooking. And I'm like screaming, and then also Davey was a little guy. He was like 3. Some of the water had splashed on him, so he's like this. He's like, ah! And I'm freaking out because I don't know like how much water, and his hands are like glued to his face. He won't. I had to like pry his arms away. And like, okay, he only got a couple flecks. He's fine. Meanwhile, my foot's cooking, So then I had to run and, peel off my sock. And I've got burns, really bad burns. Like, it's like 8 inches across my foot. And, I was in so much pain. And we went online and we read, when should you go into the emergency room or urgent care for a burn? And they said, anything more than like, I think 4 inches of skin area, you should go in or something like that. So I was like, we're not going to be able to go to sparring today. I need to get into the doctor. And as soon as I said that, my kids go, yippee! And they start like dancing. They start dancing and cheering. And meanwhile, I'm just in so much pain, I can't think. I'm just like sitting there with my foot in a bucket of water. I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is miserable. And anyway, so their mother comes in from the other room, and she looks at them and she says, how dare you celebrate the fact that your father burned his foot and is in an intense amount of pain right now. I wasn't totally on board with you going to sparring, but now you're definitely going." And they were like, "Ah." They suddenly became really sad. They got really upset. So I got dropped off at the doctor. She took him to sparring, and they got there, and then she dropped him off there, and then that's what it was. Yeah, she dropped him off there, and then took me there, and told him, "Hey, get suited up, and then I'll be back." And then she said when she got back, they were they were just sitting there by the side, no gear on or anything. He said, "Oh well, we didn't know if it would be a good time to put the gear on." She's like, "Get the gear on." And I remember her telling me that she had to have them put the gear on in the other room, and it was the hardest thing for her to do as a mother was putting the kind of armor on them and getting ready to send them out, and they were crying, and she had to ignore their tears and put the stuff on them, and it was crazy because my son actually he won his first match, which was like really really cool, and but I think that shows kind of I think like I said the most heroic thing a mother can do is to send their kid out, but yet we have this world where we're keeping children so safe, and it's not good for them. It's not good for them. It's and I think sometimes it might be because in divorced households you can get away with more. I remember I got away with terrible things because my mom and dad were separated. I'll tell you one of them. I asked my mom to buy a girl flowers, for money to buy flowers. Isn't that pathetic? Like I look back on that, I'm like, if my mom and dad were together, there's no way. I'm not a gambling man, but there's no way my dad would have allowed me to borrow money to buy a girl flowers. He would have told me, "Get a job." And I knew that my dad probably would have said that. That's why I would, like a coward, I just went around behind and did that. And if you think that sounds too harsh, and maybe there's a lady in here who's like, "Oh, but that's a nice thing. I'd love to help my son with that." Just think if your husband had to ask his mother-in-law for money to pay for your flowers. It's gross. But anyway, it is. It's gross. So mothers want to protect their children, and this is a good instinct when you have a helpless baby. But like we said, that baby's gone, and yet through some kind of voodoo of like, don't give them the license. The baby stays. I still have the baby. And the best part is that babies can't go away and get married. They'll always be my baby. So getting back to this meekness thing, there's a difference between being meek and being weak. So God wants us to be meek, and I think that gets emphasized a lot, but God also wants us to be powerful. He said, "Go out in the world and subdue it." He said, subdue subdue the earth. In the scripture reading in Romans 12:16, it says, "Be of the same mind one toward another, mind not high things, but condescend to men of low estate. Be not wise in your own conceits." But that word condescend means enjoy the company of. Enjoy the company of humble people. So that word meek, it's to describe an animal that's been tamed. So it is an animal, but then it's been tamed and trained to be responsive to its rider. And that's not, being too afraid to go out and put yourself out there is not a virtue. We shouldn't confuse meekness with weakness. An inability to dare is not meekness. Fear and timidity and the inability to put yourself out there is not meekness. So I'm hoping, and I'm going to close with this, I'm hoping that we can raise a generation of men to be like Jesus. That we need men who are willing to risk being crushed by the world. And if you're raising a son and you're not doing that, then you are raising the kind of man you are going to hate. A weak man who cannot fight, who cannot put himself out there, who can't make a decision to conquer the obstacles that are in his life. It's like one of my favorite authors said, dragons can breathe fire and kill you, but the dragon also has gold. And you don't get gold without the dragon. So I want to challenge you that there might be challenges that frighten you. And I want to challenge you that don't hide behind inaction and say that you're being like Jesus by doing nothing. That, oh, well, I'm being like Jesus. I'm being meek. There might be some challenges in your life that are frightening and scary. And maybe that's what you need to go out and do. Maybe that's what you need to go out and face. What's the alternative? You fade into obscurity and no one remembers who you are. That sounds a whole lot better than being burned alive and eaten by a dragon. But that isn't what Jesus did. He took on the largest burden he could bear. And even non-believers today recognize the separation of time by the birth of Jesus. You know, with AD and BC, they try to say, oh, we're going to use CE, the Common Era, and before the Common Era. But, well, what does that refer to? Oh, the birth of Jesus. Oops. Gotcha. So Jesus became a dividing point in history, and you are made in his image to do the same thing. So I want to challenge you, go forth and conquer, and may the Lord bless and keep us. Thank you.